Hello, everyone, and welcome to SCORE Fairfield County's live webinar on SEO basics, get found on Google. I'm Bob Hogan, the webinar coordinator today and a business mentor here at SCORE Fairfield County. And I'm going to be your host, and our presenter is Nalini Goolsarran, and more Nalini in just a minute. But first, some brief information on SCORE. SCORE is a nonprofit national partner of the SBA, and we offer three primary value-added services that you can see there on the screen. First of all, we offer one-on-one business mentoring, and you can access that in person, via Zoom or by phone, whatever works best for you, using that yellow bit.ly link on the screen, or you can just go to our website and click on the Request a Mentor button. Secondly, we offer a wide range of education programs like the one today, roughly about 100 throughout the year, and we do them both in webinar format like today and through workshops, live workshops at the local libraries. And lastly, we offer extensive resources on our website, including access to subject matter experts. Our next live webinar is next week, next Tuesday, November the 7th at noon, and the topic is Canva Basics for Do-It-Yourself Communications with Bud Freund presenting. And again, you can find more specifics on our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org. We also have a large number of recorded webinars on our website that you can access via on demand at any time. And again, you may want to check those out if you're looking for useful information. Just some logistics on today's event. We have set aside time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. And if you have a question, you can ask at any time by using the Q&A button on the screen. It's generally in the lower part of your screen. And we will take as many as we can up until the top of the hour. Our webinar will end promptly at 1 o'clock to respect your time. The session is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be available on our website within the next day or so. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Nalini Goolsarran. Nalini is the founder of EdgeSpace Marketing and is passionate about transforming business practices and streamlining communications. She has a Bachelor of Science in Computer Information Systems and experience in IT, project management, and communications. Before becoming an entrepreneur, she was an Associate COO for a division of a global financial institution. She believes in the strength of her community and regularly volunteers for organizations and causes that empower the next generation. It's now my pleasure to turn it over to Nalini. Nalini, it's all yours.
Thanks, Bob, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So today we're going to talk about SEO basics. How do you get found on Google? So a couple of things we're going to cover today are what is search engine optimization. We will talk briefly about how to understand your keywords. We'll talk about your SEO ranking factors. And then, of course, there'll be time for your Q&A. I will caveat this by saying a lot of what I'm going to cover today is quite technical. What I do recommend is, since it's recorded, you'll be able to come back. I'm going to go quite fast. So what I always say about SEO, make sure that you understand some of it. You're not going to understand everything, not unless you're super technical or have a technical background. Even there are parts that I don't always understand. So we focus on the areas that you can. Take away 2 or 3 things that you can implement yourself, and you'll find that they can be quite effective. They all work together, but it does help if you do that. All right, so let's talk about what is SEO and are you going to be found on page 1 of Google? So first of all, let's talk about some statistics. Consumers are using search engines 20% more year over year. Think about how often you pick up your phone to search something or go to your computer or your tablet or ask Alexa or Siri or Google, any type of information. It is becoming more and more commonplace. The next generation is so versed at using Siri and Alexa, especially with the audio devices in our home, that we need to build our websites to be found on Google. There's an estimated 3.5 billion searches every day on Google, accounting for about 92% of all traffic going to your website. If you have a Google My Business profile, it'll show up on Google Maps, but Google Search, Google Images, Google Shopping, all of these things are becoming more and more important. There are other search engines, Bing, Yandu, DuckDuckGo are a few of them, but they only each hold about 1% of the search engine traffic compared to Google. Google's just become the standard practice for search engines now. Organic web listings get 73% of the clicks. What that means is that if you are paying for Google ads, even if you have a Google ad running alongside your organic search, 70% of the time they're more likely. Consumers are going to click it. Consumers tend to be more careful with the sponsor links because at least once in our life, we've been burned by it where we think we landed on a legitimate website and we don't. And so they prefer to go to the organic search results instead. We also find that 68% of all online experiences begin with a search engine. When you think about Google traffic, it comes in a couple different flavors. There's navigation traffic, which means that they're typing in the name of a business to find their website, as opposed to trying to type in the URL or speaking it to Alexa or Google themselves into the voice search. So when they're saying your online experience begins with a search engine, it usually means that only about less than 40% of the time is someone actually typing in your domain directly into the browser or hitting a bookmark. The rest of the time, they're probably going to Google to search for your business. Even though they know how to get there, it's just easier. Your organic SEO drives 1000% more traffic than your organic social media. All businesses do need a social media presence, but you need your organic SEO that much more. Less than 1% of Google searchers click the results from the second page. Now, this is less relevant these days than it used to be, because if you'll notice when you're on Google these days, when you're scrolling down, when you get to the bottom of the page, you no longer have something that say next that takes you to page 1, or excuse me, to page 2. You see something that says load more. This is now called the infinite scroll. And what Google is doing is they realize that people aren't really clicking page 2, but they are clicking load more and will continue to scroll down. It's their way of kind of hiding page 2 by creating the load more and the infinite scroll. What we're seeing in the SEO world is people are getting better results if they're a little bit lower in the ranking that would have been page 2. They're finding a better opportunity to get those organic clicks so they can move up into page 1. 69%, so roughly 70% of all search queries are 4 or more words. What this means is these are your long tail keywords. So instead of just typing in digital marketing, they might say digital marketing near me, digital marketing for small businesses, digital marketing for bakeries. Like they might find very specific niches, or they will ask Google complete sentences and or questions. So when they're saying that the search queries are 4 or more words, we're calling these your long tail keywords versus your short tail or your head keywords. And 48% of consumers use voice for general web searches. So they might be in the car, they might just be here. I find that lately I find myself too lazy to type it and I just hit the voice search, and it's just easier to tell Google what I'm looking for because it's more about that impatience level. So how does SEO work? Your goal is to increase the quantity and the quality of traffic to your website through organic search engine results. Traffic to your website is great, but not all traffic is created equal. Meaning, if you are a plumber and somebody is typing in a search query and your website might have keywords that relate to it, let's say for a bakery, and they weren't actually looking for a plumber, what might end up happening is maybe they ended up coming to your website to explore it, but then they leave without converting. What that's signaling to Google is that you don't match that search query, and then you start to get deranked in that space. It also signals to Google around the profile of the user. There's lots of factors that go into this. When somebody is looking for information, they type in the keywords or they say it. It used to be you would type in just kind of keywords like digital marketing near me. Now people are asking Google full questions. Google, how do I find a digital marketer located in this area? Because they don't have to type it all. They can actually ask it as a complete sentence and get results. Google's crawler has crawled the internet and built this ginormous database of all the information available related to any and everything, right? It's scanned all these websites and it's trying to figure out how to serve you the best results. The information is indexed and fed through an algorithm so that they can give you results. The reason this came about is some of you may recall, in the late 90s, early 2000s, when Google was just coming on the scene, there were lots of different search engines at the time. There was Ask.com, Ask Jeeves. There was search engines specific to photography and music and different things because search engines were new and everybody was trying to compete. So they had to figure out how to outperform the competition. This has stuck around. And although Google holds the lion's share of all the search results, they want to continue to make sure that they are providing the best user experience. So you continue to use Google and you don't find Bing or Yandu or DuckDuckGo a good alternative because they don't want to lose you to them. So their job is to make sure that the query that's inputted and the results that's given matches. This is where our job comes in. Here are some important aspects of your SEO. First, you want to identify your keywords. You can use Google Trends. If you're not familiar with Google Trends, you can literally go to Google and type in Google Trends. It will take you to the website, and Google Trends will help you research what people are actually searching for. This is where you start your educated guessing process. You're finding your keywords kind of depends on what people are looking for. So you have to figure out what that is. It can't just be us making it up. I could be saying people are looking for digital marketing Stanford, but maybe they're really searching for SEO expert near me. But I can go to Google Trends and see that by typing in that keyword phrase and seeing what the results look like. Once you've figured out your keywords, you then want to configure your on-site and your off-site SEO, which is a lot of what we'll get into today. You then want to configure your Google Analytics. So this way you can see the results. So after you put in all this hard work, you need to know if it's actually working. So your Google Analytics is a great way, and in fact, the only way to really see how your website is performing against Google's algorithm, what the traffic looks like. You can even tell when people are coming to your site, how long they're staying, and what pages they're looking at. You also want to make sure you submit your sitemap to the Google Search Console. So there's Google Analytics, and then there's also the Search Console. While the analytics telling you, the demographic details of who's coming to your website, how long they're staying, and what they're doing on your website, your Google Search Console is telling you what they searched for to find you. There's also a place where you can check for technical issues. If Google says that, it found an issue, you usually get an email on this. But your sitemap is a giant index of everything on your website. You're basically telling Google, here is my website. If you're using WordPress, Wix, Shopify, Squarespace, your sitemap is a built-in feature. If you have a custom-built website, you might want to talk to your developers for the direct path for it. And there's lots of tutorials online about how to submit the sitemap to Google. It's actually very straightforward. And then lastly, you want to set up your Google My Business profile, also known as Google Business Profile. It's a place where you can put in your website, your hours, your location. And if you don't have a location like my business, which is virtual, you will then put in your service area, because that's important for people to know, especially if you have a geographic limitation. So for example, if you're a bakery that cannot sell outside of Connecticut because you have, the rules and regulations say that, then you would make sure your service area only says that. If you have a more of expansive reach, then you can put that in as well. So when we're thinking about what people are searching for on Google, remember that statistics, about 78% of searches start on Google. Let's start with the search intent. When people come to Google, they have a reason they're searching. The first thing is informational intent. They are looking for information on a topic. They're not necessarily looking to buy anything. They're not looking for any details on a product, maybe they are, but what they're looking for is information. You also then have something called navigational intent. Not necessarily navigation in the sense of your address, but this is actually a way to find your actual website, because people get lazy. Like, you can type in edgespacemktg.com, or you can just tell Google EdgeSpace Marketing, the search comes up, you click the first button. It's very often that people are using this feature more than ever. You have a transactional intent. These are people that are actually looking to buy something. So this is the ones that are looking to buy plants. They're looking for that plumber. They're looking to actually transact. And that transaction could very well be reaching your service-based business. Then you have commercial investigation intent. These are the people that are just about ready to buy something, but they're not sure. So they're doing their research around what it is, like, for example, the different features of a phone, or maybe it's looking for, plants that can grow in my region that are, winter hardy and ready for the fall. Maybe they're new homeowners, but this is where they're really looking for that commercial information to help them make their purchase. When you use keywords that are intent specific, you want to consider some of the modifiers. So for example, things like where to, why to, like they're usually verbs, and it's usually what you're thinking about. Maybe your FAQs answer this, you have a blog that speak to it. And this is where you're wanting to make sure the content you're writing fits both the terms people are searching for as well as the search intent. So for example, if we're using transactional intent and somebody's looking to buy lavender plants, that's the keyword might be buy lavender plants. but you might want to write some language, maybe it's a blog, about how to overwinter lavender plants, because we live in a region where they may die in the fall or the winter as soon as the snow starts to fall. They may come back next year, they may not. What you're doing is providing information to inform their decision and help them get one step closer to buying from you. You want to make sure your pages or your posts are very informational when people are looking for information. It's very often that you show up at a search result for an informational intent where someone's saying gardening best practices as the example, and then they click on the page and it's not talking about gardening at all. It might be talking about, I don't know, trimming your hedges, right? Which they're related, but they might not be exactly what that person is searching for. What happens in that case? They probably just leave your website. They may not explore your website any further. What they'll do is go back to Google and click on the next result. And Google will see that as a signal that you do not have information the user wants and can de-rank you, moving you down the ranking because they didn't stay on your page long enough or that it didn't match up the search intent. Google has a big database. It has all this information on websites and it has all this information on us. And this is where we have to keep in mind how Google uses demographic information to feed results. Your search results and my search results for the same query may not be the same because Google's looking at what my search profile looks like, what content I'm interested in, and giving me content that it thinks I will be interested in. And this is where we as business owners have to kind of navigate this world a little bit and figure out, how do I build content that will reach the user through Google? You also want to make sure that you're the first one that comes up when someone is searching for your company name. I couldn't tell you how often somebody types in, a business name when they come to me and say they have SEO problems. And I go, look, I type in the business name and they're not ranking for number 1 for their business name. They might be 4 or 5. And there are other businesses that have similar names, but not the same name. So maybe they don't have their business name in the right spot, or they've gotten fancy with their business name on their website and it doesn't quite match their marketing. This is the number 1 thing you should rank for, is at very least your business name. And then make sure that you're providing content that is informative, especially for the folks that are in the transactional intent or the commercial investigation intent. They're looking for information to help inform their decision, and you want to make sure you're giving that to them. Do not bury the lead and have them contact you for more information unless it's absolutely necessary. A perfect example is if you're a gym. People are usually price shopping. That's usually what they're looking for. If you have a private gym that requires somebody to call you to get the pricing, chances are they may not call you because they just wanted to know what the price was and what's included in it. Don't bury the lead so much on that. Certain things you may want to consider, hiding or having them contact you for, but be as informative as possible. And then lastly, lead people to your sales page if they're looking to buy one of your products. So suppose you wrote a blog about lavender plants. They now want to buy said lavender plants because they've got all this information that says how they can overwinter them. They're going to look great in their yard. They love it and they want to buy them. But now there's no link at the bottom of the page that says buy now, or not included anywhere in the blog. Now they've got to go dig around your website. It depends on how interested they really are in buying from you. Will they continue that navigation process to go dig around for it? Maybe not. We're finding users are becoming less and less interested in having to look for things. If it's not easily available, they'd rather go look for a different website that makes it easy for them. So let's get into the real nitty-gritty. What are your on-page and off-page SEO ranking factors? This is what I like to call this the SEO table of contents. This is all of the SEO elements that go into your ranking factors. There are several types. There are domain level, which is related to your www. There's page level, which is the content on the page itself. There is the site level, which is the whole website taking into context. User intention. This is why it was really important to go over understanding why people are searching so you can tailor your content to meet their needs. And then there's a whole section of penalization. All of these content or ranking factors work together. Not a single one of these alone will make a difference. But like I said, if you could take away 2 or 3 to implement, they will work together for you. Several positive factors are great, but any one negative factor can significantly drop you in the ranking. Google's penalizations are very heavy. So do not content stuff. Do not have thin content, which is the biggest thing we're seeing right now. In March of this year, Google changed the algorithm. And what it said was, you need to present yourself as an expertise and the user experience. So what that means is Do you have the expertise to say the things that you're saying, right? Are you saying that you should buy lavender plants, or are you saying all the qualities and factors about keeping that plant alive? Google's looking to see if you can outrank your competition because you're providing more information. A lot of websites right now do not have enough words on their homepage. Google is looking for anywhere from 700 to 1,000 words on your homepage alone, much less the other pages on your website. Those pages can be a little thinner, but your homepage, Google's looking for something a little bit more robust. The visuals are amazing and they need to be there, but you need to balance them against the content on your website to make sure that you have enough content to feed Google. Think about it this way. If you don't have enough words on your website, how does Google actually know what you're about? And the same goes for your consumer. We know that people are lazy to read. However, they want the opportunity to read. So if you have a page that's mostly visual and doesn't have enough words on it, Google has enough information to know that those websites don't perform or convert. People don't get in any information that they need, and they usually leave and go to the competition. So this is why they've begun prioritizing your expertise as one of the first criteria for your ranking on Google. What we saw happen this year in March when that new algorithm rolled out is that folks that didn't have enough words on their homepage saw an immediate drop in their SEO ranking. This is an incredibly important violation that you want to stay away from. So do not have thin content on your website. And I'll get more into that in a bit. So let's first now talk about those content SEO ranking factors. The first thing you want to have is to make sure your website has good quality content. Listen, we have ChatGPT, we have Google Bard, there are tons of AI tools cropping up. Let them help you do your research. With a caveat, be sure that you're also wordsmithing that research and fact checking it. We've now seen that these AI tools can sometimes be incorrect. You also don't want to sound exactly the same as your competition. So what I always recommend is use it as a starting point and then fix it up a little bit, readjust it. Think about it as if you were writing a paper for college and you were doing research, and you need to make sure you're not copywriting, infringing, or plagiarizing anything. Same goes for how you put content on your website. Use the AI tools to help you, but don't let the AI tool content be your final content. Do your research. Figure out what those keywords are using Google Trends. Go look at what your competition is doing. If you're, say, like, let's use digital marketing Stanford as an example. If I go to Google right now and I type in digital marketing Stanford and I'm not showing up as number one, which I am not right now, I did that deliberately. I'm trying to rank for other keywords right now, but suppose I wanted to change that. I would go look to see what the top performing websites are saying, because there's a reason Google moved them first. There's a few different factors, but one of them would be the content on the page. So I would look to see what is the difference between my website and theirs, what keywords it appears they're using. I would go to Google Trends and check those keywords in Google Trends and say, okay, this is what I think the keyword is, see what Google's giving you, and then I make a decision on whether or not you want to keep that exact keyword, use a version of it, use it in a different place on your website. This is how you use your educated guess to do your research. Look at the answers on Google. When you type in anything these days, Google has a little section right at the top that says, people also ask. That is a very, very informative place of what Google is telling you that people want information on. This is a great place to get things like content for your blogs, content for your website. What you really want to do is make sure you are answering the questions that people have in their mind, and Google is feeding that to you. You also generally want to think about your audience in general and what pain points and issues they may be having that Google might not necessarily say, but you know from experience as a business owner, these are questions that need answering, and answer them on your website. There's an art to this though. I have one rule that I tell everybody when they're building their website content. If you have questions in the form of an actual question, it belongs in the FAQ, or you have a Q&A. If you're writing marketing copy, do not actually have a question in your marketing copy, as it comes across as a late night infomercial, and Google penalizes for that because Google realizes it's slightly lazy marketing because you didn't take it the next step to just answer the question. So it's more of the, that thing we learned in school about when you're answering a question, you kind of have to restate the question in the answer. Use that approach when you're writing your copy. In your notes that you have the question, but the content that goes on your website is the answer, which has the question built into it so it can stand on its own. When you have your keywords, you want to make sure that the content is solving problems and answer the questions that people are Googling. That's exactly what we just covered, and it just reinforces it. Google covers answers slightly differently than keywords. So think of it as your answers are the long format and your keywords are those tight little short 4 to 10 words that are the actual keyword phrases, those long tail keywords. The last thing on this list are freshness and multimedia. So freshness is, how often is your website updated? Most service-based businesses build a website because they offer services and they don't touch it again forever. I don't update my website. I rebuilt my website 3 years ago, and other than adding events to my website, I don't have anything to update on it. My services are the same. So how do you make sure that your website is fresh in the eyes of Google? And fresh is literally the last time your website was updated. So think about it like buying milk. Is that milk a month old or 2 months old or 2 weeks old? Same thing Google's looking at with your website. Has it actually been updated since that time? And how does Google know this? The quickest way they know it is by reading your sitemap, which we mentioned earlier. So whenever you update your website, your sitemap gets updated, Google gets notified, it re-indexes your site. The more often Google is re-indexing your site, the more often you are able to try to rise in those rankings. So a lot of businesses leverage blogs for this, because every time you add a blog, you've updated your website. If you're adjusting a past blog, you've updated your website. Now, you do want to make sure the changes you're making are meaningful, which is where blogs are a great way to do this. The other reason blogs are very helpful is that, again, it allows you to establish yourself as an expert in your field. And as Google is prioritizing expertise, you're answering those questions that you're seeing in your research through your blog. The last one is multimedia. Images, videos, audio are important ways of delivering high quality content. When you're uploading images, they do not need to be any bigger than 2,000 pixels in any direction. If you're technically familiar with that, you can use Paint or other programs on your computer to shrink the pixels. Anything bigger than that, while the high resolution is wonderful, your website doesn't need it. The human eye on a media device can't really detect the difference between a 2,000 pixel image and an 8,000 pixel image. That's really important for when you're printing so that it doesn't blur when you're printing. But on your computer, 2,000 is usually the recommendation. Some web developers even go as far as saying 1,000. I do find that sometimes when you go that low, they can end up looking a little blurry on the website, just depending on the original quality of the image. When you're using video and audio, these things usually you do not upload directly to your website. They're usually hosted either on YouTube or a platform that provides that as a medium, and then you embed it on your website. Later on, we're going to get into website speed, and all of these multimedia elements can slow down your website. So it's really important to understand sizing and those things. Last thing in this space is when you're uploading anything to your website, be it a photo, an image, an audio, a video, you want to make sure you're renaming those files with your keywords. If you upload image 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Google read image 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Google isn't necessarily able to see the image and see what it is, but the description you give the image in the title tells Google. So that's a great way to put in keywords. Perfect example is some of those keywords that may not make sense to put front and center. Perfect example for me would be SEO optimization. Now that breaks down to search engine optimization. So I would never put that front and center on my website because it's grammatically incorrect and I don't want to come across as not knowing what I'm talking about. But I do know that people are searching for that. So what I would do, rename a file as SEO optimization and upload that image to Google. So now that image that is about SEO, I'm going to use it on the SEO page, and I'm going to have that image that has SEO optimization in the title on the SEO page. I've now told Google SEO and SEO optimization all go together, and it's using those keywords in tandem. When we start to talk about the content structure of your website, we get into things like HTML, descriptions, headings. What does this mean? So the first thing you have is your HTML title tag. This is when you are in Google and you type in something, you see the little snippet that shows up that has a title and it has a description. That is what the HTML title tag is and the meta description tag. Now, Google has said this isn't necessarily a huge ranking factor, but what this is for the human element of your SEO, your users. People who are searching for you, they will read the snippet, and the snippet is what allows them to actually visit your website. They will drive them to click it. So that's why you want your snippet on the title and the description to reach the user's intent. So again, if somebody's looking to buy lavender plants and your description is saying, we're the best gardening center near you, but it doesn't actually tell you if you actually sell lavender plants, they may skip over your link. That's what's called a zero-click result, meaning the result showed up in the listing, but it got 0 clicks. And that often happens because either they clicked on somebody who ranked higher than you and found what they were looking for. Maybe they skipped past you because it just didn't seem to meet their needs. When you get into the header tags, on your website, you have sections that have headings, right? The big font that says what you do, how you do it in different sections. Those are called headings, and they should be placed in a header tag. Now, if you're familiar with HTML, you would change that. Most of these web builders don't have you write HTML. You can just select from the list, highlight the text, and change it from paragraph to H1, H2, H3, all the way to H6. Why is this important? This is establishing to Google the hierarchy of your content. So an example would be in the SEO world, or even in the digital marketing world, on a services page, H1, the big heading at the top, would be digital marketing services. That's one set of keywords I know people are looking for. And sometimes it doesn't have to be a keyword, it's just your services. Then I have my individual services that'll be in an H2 tag. Web development, SEO, social media management, those would be in H2. And if I have a subheading, that would go into H3. And then I have my description, which is in a paragraph format. That is how you use the heading tags effectively. It is a hierarchy of content. So think of it like back in the days when we used to write papers for college, you had a table of contents and you had chapter headings and subchapter headings and subchapter headings. That's essentially how your your header tags are working. I mentioned earlier file names, just mention them again. Just make sure that when you're uploading files, images, documents to your website, that they are using identifiable keywords. A perfect example of using your business name. I mentioned earlier that you want to make sure you rank for your business. Here are sometimes why people don't rank for their business. My business name is EdgeSpace Marketing, and I need to upload my logo file to my website. I could upload it as EM logo. Google interprets that as EM logo. I could then say EdgeSpace Marketing logo. Now Google knows that this image is the EdgeSpace Marketing logo. So now when Google is searching for, someone is searching for EdgeSpace Marketing, they're trying to find me. When they look it up, Google will say, okay, I've associated this website name to this image name and all these other factors. This is probably the top ranked one they should go to. And suppose there's a competition with a similar name. They might have missed this step, and there's a little way you can nudge up against your competition. Images and files also have something called alt text, alternative text. This is for compliance with ADA, Americans with the Disabilities Act. So those who are not able to view the website might have a reader that is telling them what the image is about. It is really important that we leverage this space because we do need to be in compliance for ADA, but it's also an opportunity to fill in some keywords. So for example, if the image is some people typing on a computer, you could use the alt text to say people typing on a computer about digital marketing, right? You can sneak in a keyword here and there, or you can just say people typing on a computer, comma, digital marketing Stanford, because maybe I want to put in all my keywords there. But make sure the first thing you do put in is the description of the images. You're seeing this more and more across news websites. Even social media has a place for the alt text. Make sure you're filling those in as much as possible. Then we also get into the site-specific stuff. This is where we're talking about the website as a whole. What does that mean? One of the first thing Google is looking for is your site crawlability. Now, your sitemap is what tells Google all the content on your website so it can crawl it. Your website also has something called robots.txt. It's the text file that's built into your website. We don't have any control over this, neither do you. They're usually driven by your WordPress, your Squarespace, and such. And the robots.txt will tell Google which pages that need to be skipped because they may be irrelevant. So for example, on our e-commerce website, the cart is listed as no index because everybody's cart's going to change, and that's not really specific to your website. That's specific to the consumer. So for privacy reasons and other reasons, Google doesn't necessarily need to index the cart page or the checkout page because those are going to be unique to the user, not so much to your website. But you do want to make sure your sitemap is submitted to Google so Google can index your site. You also want to make sure your site is mobile responsive. I can't tell you how often I come across a site in today's day and age that just doesn't function on my phone. It's the the web version that's been shrunk down so tiny, I can barely use it on my phone. And it's a frustrating user experience. Google knows this and they know users get frustrated. So if they know that your website is not mobilely responsive, meaning it doesn't convert to a mobile format that's friendly, it may not actually rank your website, because while your your website version on your desktop is beautiful, the mobile version is going to frustrate users. Before the pandemic, about 90% of users were coming from mobile. Now we're seeing a shift where it's more about 60-40 between the desktop and mobile, simply because a lot of people with working from home are able to access their home devices, and they may not necessarily have to do it on their phone. They could do it on their computer. With the return to the office, the numbers are skewing back more mobile than desktop. So you want to make sure both versions are very user-friendly. Are your URLs descriptive? Now, if you are on Wix, Shopify, and Squarespace, that's a non-issue. If you're on WordPress, this is what's called your permalink. This is the end of the domain. So it's www.businessname.com/services, about us, contact, FAQs. Or it could say, www.businessname.com/get to know us or meet the team. When you start to get overly creative with your domain URLs, you can start to confuse Google and the users. Same with your pictures. Your domain name it's not your domain name. The URL at the end of your domain should be descriptive enough to match the content on the page. Google is making sure that all the pieces connect to each other. And so they want to make sure you're doing the same thing. In WordPress, you're looking for something called permalink settings. The default setting is for it to say post ID 1234, because WordPress was originally designed for blogging. They now have a permalink setting where it can be called post name. And then you really want to use that feature, because if you wrote a blog about how to grow lavender, you don't want the page to say businessname.com/page ID 123. It goes back to the image thing. Google doesn't know what it is. Versus businessname.com/how to grow lavender is very specific and descriptive. This is where, when you did your keyword research, you would know what phrase to use, or just name it after your blog. Your site speed. People are incredibly impatient. You have on average 3 to 8 seconds from the time they click the original link. So if they clicked it in Google, they typed it in the browser, they clicked it over from Instagram, the clock started. And after 3 seconds, if the page isn't fully loaded, most people leave. In fact, the average recently I saw was somewhere about 1.5 seconds. And a faster loading website is the best kind you have, because 3 seconds is a really long time in today's day and age. When you're thinking about social media not loading or the website not loading, people get impatient. So you want to make sure that your images are sized right. This is one way you do it, making sure they're no bigger than 2 megapixels each. If you've uploaded a ton of images to your website during your build phase and you're not using most of them, get rid of the ones you're not using. Everything in your website is loading in the background and all slowing down your website. So once you're ready to go live, or if you've been doing some testing, clean up the old images. It really does matter. You also want to make sure that you are not duplicating content across your website. Google is incredibly specific about how often they're seeing the same content on your website page over page. Like things like your business name is not going to change, but you may need to say the difference between digital marketing and marketing for small businesses and small business marketing. Those are all variations on the keywords. When you overuse the exact one same keyword because you're trying to perform for it, Google actually penalizes you for that, because they look at that as keyword stuffing. And I'll get into that in a little bit. The next thing you want to make sure is that you have a SSL certificate installed on your website. This is now a mandatory thing, where when someone goes to your website, it says, oh, this website isn't secure. Are you sure you want to proceed? In the past, you only needed the certificate if you were an e-commerce website. This has since changed, and now Google wants to see it for every website, because we live in a day and age of scammers and spammers and hackers. So they want to make sure every website is secure. Your hosting provider should provide an SSL as part of your plan. If you're on a legacy plan, because some of the older plans did not include it, you may need to buy this separately. If you're not familiar with it, you could always just look for, in your browser bar, you're looking for HTTPS. You're also looking for that lock icon. Those are some of the factors that we would check for to make sure that the website is secure. And then the last thing you want to make sure in this section is the structure of your website, does it make logical sense? Very often people get really creative with their navigation and they confuse users. For example, your hours and your contact details do not go on the About Us page, they go on the Contact Us page. But your Contact Us page should be called the Contact Us page and not something creative like, get in touch as the page name. On the page itself, it can say get in touch, but the page name itself should say contact us. Google is very simple. Users are very straightforward with what they're looking for. Websites hierarchy usually start with home, about us, services and or programming, depending on what type of website you have. Maybe it has shop now for your products. And then it might also have an FAQ, contact us, and blogs. That's your main navigation. Underneath that, you will have subcategories. And then again, you need to make sure that that information hierarchically makes sense. Google is very particular about, does the structure of your website confuse users or even confuses Google, or does it make sense? The best thing to do is once you're close to building your website, or if you've made a change to it when you're nearly done, have somebody not so familiar with your business go through the navigation and give you feedback on whether it makes sense to them, because those who are familiar with you will know where to go inherently, but those who are not familiar with you, which are your new users, you need to make sure that they can inherently know where to go as well. When we start to get into your overall website, the domain level stuff that I mentioned earlier, you have link quality. Google is counting how many links point to a website, but they don't count them all equally. Some of you may have heard this as backlinking or backlinking strategies. You want to be very careful with this. If you've ever participated in a backlinking strategy from someone that says, oh, we can put your website on these backlinks, Google knows which of those sites are scams and spams, and they're just there to just they call them link farm, because they just put them on a website that have no reason or rhyme. What I do recommend is that where possible, curate where your links are coming from. So if you have trade partners that you are certified to work with each other, or you just have a partnership with someone and you can refer business back and forth, it's good from their page to have a link to you and a link from your website to their page, because what it's showing is the collaboration, but again, the quality of the link coming in. It's a validated business coming to your validated business versus a link farm that might be unknown. If you're using things like anchor links, and this is where when you click on a button or a link, it jumps lower down on the page. That's called an anchor. In an anchor space, you want to make sure that it's descriptive, not anchor 1, anchor 2, but services or whatever the service name is, or whatever the name of the section is that they're jumping to on that page. Your website should have a number of links going and coming from your website. Now, you have internal links, so your homepage should link to much of your internal pages, whether it's from your homepage is a little snippet about Meet the Owners and it goes to About Us, whether there's a snippet on the homepage about your products and it goes to the Shop Now section. This is all linking internally. Somewhere on your website, you do want to have at least a few external links, meaning they're going, whether it's tagged at the bottom by your web developer going to their website because they have credibility in the space, or it's going to SCORE, the SBA, because you have partnerships with them, or you want to reference them in your About Us section because they helped you grow. Those are all valuable links, but you just need to make sure that you're putting them in a place where it makes sense. If you're a service-based business, mentioning SCORE or the SBA may only be useful in the About Us section and nowhere else on your website. So just use those links very thoughtfully. I mention this a lot because it's becoming more and more important. Google wants to know if you're an expert in this space, and do you have the authority to say that? Now, think about how big Google's database is. So Google is using that to leverage validating your expertise and authority. It can see who's saying what, and it can check your information against real experts or who they've deemed as experts in the field. So make sure whatever you're saying is validated on your website. And again, more informative content establishes you as an expert. When we get into the history and anchors come up again because it shows up in 2 different places on your website. Your history is how long you've been around. Think about it as you're a newbie website that just got built. Google doesn't yet know if you're a spam website, if you're legitimate. So it's going to start to build a little history on you and how often people are visiting you, what they're coming for, and how they're interacting with your website. And that's how you build your authority ranking factor. I mentioned anchors before. It's the same thing. In this case, you want to just make sure they're not broken. In this section, Google's checking for broken links and broken anchor links, because anchor links is one of those things people tend to forget about when they're checking things. They move a section and they don't rename the anchor, or they don't check that the link they had before is actually working. Broken links are bad for SEO, so make sure you're checking for that. Shares. You want to make sure that your content is being shared across the internet. And so whether that means that you're using social media or you're using other mechanisms, whether it's blogs and the blog hopping mechanism, they want to make sure that people are talking about you, because anywhere that your content is talked about on a public social media page, Google is taking that all into account to say, oh, this person has expertise and authority. People are listening to them. People are sharing their content. The experience of your website, the user experience, is one of the most important parts of your ranking factors. Too often, people forget about how easy it is to navigate. Pretty is very important, but beyond pretty, it needs to be easy to navigate and understand. We mentioned this a lot earlier about the user intent. Google is matching the user intent from the search to the content on your page. So the more informative your website is to match those search intents, the better it is. So just make sure that you are connecting those dots when you're building your content. And then, of course, locality. If you are in an area where you're hyper local and you need to reach those users, on your contact us page, make sure you're mentioning where you service. Somewhere on your website should have either an address or a service area, so Google can get a sense of where to drive traffic from when people are searching for near me. And then lastly, when you're looking at engagement, this is the user's personal history. This one you have no control over, but this is an important ranking factor. So what this means is that the end user, that person doing the search that you want to get to your website, Google is taking into account that person's personal demographic profile. What type of content are they usually interested in? What types of websites do they usually visit? And then people who match my demographic profile, what did they look at? And then Google puts it all together to say, okay, this is the best result for the search query. So really quickly on the violation side and the blocking side, you need to make sure your website is not light on content, you're not keyword stuffing, and more importantly, do not hide text in white font on white background. Back in the day, digital marketers used to tell you, excuse me, jumped ahead too fast. Back in the day, digital marketers and SEO experts used to say, see all that white space on my page? They would then hide text there in white font, and that's how they would get away with their keyword rankings without actually putting it in the page in the language. Google has gotten wise to that and now takes your website, dumps it to code, and it can tell when you've hidden, because the HTML will tell them where there's white text on top of a white background. And so they know that you're doing that, and that's called keyword stuffing or also cloaking content. Be really careful about that. You also want to be very careful with intrusive ads and pop-ups. The number one killer for a lot of websites right now are pop-ups. You know, that little subscribe thing that says, oh, subscribe now. Users are trying to hit that X so fast, they never even read what your pop-up said. It is very rare that people are finding success with those pop-ups. Have the email subscription somewhere on the website, but just be careful of how often you have that pop-up coming in and if it's covering up content. Because the minute they're on their phone and they're trying to X out that pop-up, it can be hard. Sometimes their phone screen is cracked. Sometimes the X doesn't work. You know what ends up happening? They hit the back button and they leave your website. So you don't want them doing that. So the less intrusive ads you can have or pop-ups, the better. Those who have actual blogging websites that depend on those ads, they can become super cumbersome. And again, Google knows this, whether it's a little video floating in the corner or an ad that covers up the content again, or another video playing over here. You get to a website and there's so much chaos happening, people leave again. You want to make sure you get ahead of that. And especially if you do run ads on the blog page or anything like that, make sure they're not at the top of the page, because Google knows that if a website is top heavy with ads, people leave again. So you want to make sure those are lower down on your page if you are using ads. So here's some of my best practices for you. Rename your image files before uploading them to your website. If you already have images uploaded to your website as image 1234 and you need to rename it, depending on your website platform, you may need to upload a new version of it, put it wherever it needs to go on your website, and then delete the one that has the gibberish or the non-descriptive file name. You then want to make sure you change your URL structure from, page ID 1234 to whatever the descriptive name is of your URL. Here are some perfect examples of services and best practices. So services would be my services page, and best practices for SEO is probably a blog. And then when you're looking at your title and your meta, here's a couple examples how you can include your location in your title tag. I've got my business name, I've got a keyword, and then at the very end, I have the location. So I can work internationally or nationally. So I've kept a local name, but I've also kept United States so I can reach a little broader. And then, of course, use your keyword combinations in the alt text or alt tag of your images. So important aspects of your SEO, we'll just kind of wrap it back up again. Identify your keywords, configure your on-site and off-site, configure your Google Analytics, submit your sitemap to Google Search Console, and make sure you set up your Google Business Profile.
Thanks, Nalini. There's a lot of great information there. And as Nalini said, she went really fast. So the session has been recorded and will be available on our website in the next day or so. But we'll now use the remaining time for questions. Just a reminder, if you have any, you can use the Q&A button and we'll take as many as we can up until the top of the hour. The first one is from Matthew. His question is, where does Amazon fit in the search engine model? I know a lot of people actually use Amazon to search, especially for products.
So Amazon, think of Amazon as its own ecosystem. So you would not use Amazon search to find things on Google specifically. You would use Amazon to search within Amazon. So Amazon probably have their own SEO. For example, Instagram has their own SEO capabilities and models. And I'm sure if you did some Googling, you probably would find like best ways to find your Amazon keywords, because your Amazon keywords are going to be different than your Google keywords. Because remember, on Amazon, everybody's on there transactionally. So you don't need to necessarily have the informational keywords as much as the transaction ones.
Next one is from Allison, and it was when you were talking about the search intent, and her question is, how does the search know what the intent is?
It's a tricky question. A lot of it has to do with how they search and what they do afterward. So it's, for example, if I type in lavender plants near me, doesn't really help Google, but I might say where to buy lavender plants near me. It's automatically telling Google that it's a transactional search because I'm looking where to buy it. I might look for a garden center near me, which can go in a couple different directions based on Google's large database. And like, think of the AI models that can answer questions and understand what you're looking for. It's kind of inherently built into how people search and what they're searching for. This is where those long tail keywords become extra important, because now you're giving Google more information to inform what you're looking for. And as business owners, we can then use that to inform our content.
Great. The next one is from Frank. Do meta keywords have any value?
I might need a little clarification on that. Are we talking about meta as in Facebook, or are we talking about meta as in the meta description? So Frank, if you're still on, if you could put it back in the chat or the Q&A, we can circle back to that one.
Okay, that's great. We'll come back. The next one is from David. How does BARD, or artificial intelligence, affect Google search?
This is an interesting one. I have been researching this one to see if it can actually help. And I don't know that it's been helping. I've actually gone to Google Bard and said, like, you're an SEO expert. Give me SEO keywords in this space. And it actually says, I can't help you with that. So it's a bit of an unknown and to be determined. I think we're going to know more in the next year or two as the AI models evolve, or as people figure out how to leverage it for us.
Frank just clarified it. He was saying it's meta in the HTML keywords tag that he was referring to.
Meta in the HTML keywords tag. I'm not familiar with that one, Frank. Maybe we can talk offline. The meta that I'm familiar with is the meta description, which is going back to where you have the title and then the little blurb that comes underneath. That's important. Google may not take it in as one of the main ranking factors, but when somebody's searching in Google and they're reading that snippet, that's important for them to make a decision on whether or not they're going to click your link. And so that is very important that's more about where you're going to include some more details and try to get it in, because again, you have a character limit, what you can get there to pique someone's interest to click your link.
Okay, that's great. Next one is from Jessica. When you were talking about the various tags, her question is, where do you find all these tags to change them?
It depends on your platform. So if you're in WordPress, you would go into the media library, or when you're adding an image to a page, which would be the same for Shopify and or Squarespace or Wix. When you're in the section where you're adding the image to the page and you're selecting the image, often you can see the details on the image and there's a box that says alt text or alt tag. You can Google it. You can say WordPress alt text. Where do I find it? Same for, Shopify, Squarespace, and Wix.
Okay, next one is from Harry. For SEO purposes, can Google see the text that is included in an accordion? This is how I have FAQ set up, where the title of the accordion is the question that might be asked, and then the website visitor must click on the accordion to make it drop down to show the answer. Can search engines see the text that is in the drop down area? So long question there, but
yeah, it's a good question. The answer is most of the time, yes. If you're using a built-in functionality for, let's say, Elementor on WordPress or Wix or Squarespace, those containers are designed to be read by Google. Where this gets tricky is if you're custom coding it in HTML, and if you do something wrong or you're using CSS or Java, like the coding can inhibit Google from reading it. But if you're using the built-in functionalities of those platforms, you should be fine and Google can read it because they're designed for Google to read them.
okay, yeah, very helpful. Next one is from Allison, who's asking if you have affiliate programs. I'm not sure what you're referring there to, Allison. Maybe you can just clarify that and we'll come back to it. Next one is from Thomas. Is there a recommended free or paid site we can use to determine how our site is performing?
You know, there's a whole lot of SEO engines and tools out there that can tell you. The common ones are Moz, SEMrush, Ahrefs. These are quite expensive. I have used SEMrush for a year or so, and I switched over to Ahrefs, Ahref, in the past 2 years. My clients seem to like the reporting we get out of that. As a business owner, it gives me a little scalability for how many projects I can have in there, but they're very expensive. They're anywhere from $100 plus. And every month when that renews, I'm like, oh, can I get something cheaper? And I haven't found it, but there's cheaper ones. And then it depends on what you're looking for. So you might want to dig around Google and see which one you seem to like more.
Next one's from Julie. Can you please show the violations detail page again? Well, Julie, maybe you can just catch that on the recording, and we'll go to the next one. Shamim, should I give a Facebook link?
Yes. If you have social media, you should have icons linking to your social media. But what you should not do is have a Facebook feed on your website. I see that very often. It's very cumbersome and chaotic on your website. Instagram feed looks good because you have your squares that go across, and that always looks nice. But if your Facebook, any of your other social medias, you should have like a little section that has your social media icons that link to your social media pages. Those are great outgoing links.
Okay, got time for a couple more. One from Harry. I received an SEO report from a company. It shows that my company address wasn't found, but I have my company address clearly stated on my Contact US page. What could be the reason that the SEO report didn't recognize my address on the website?
This is an example going back to the previous question about whether or not the reports work for you. If you go to Google and type in your business, and you can see your Google My Business profile has your address, and you know your address is visible on your Contact Us page, and maybe it's in the footer of your website, it could be that the report itself is not really a great report because the tool is just not scraping the website properly.
Okay, one more. Is it possible, I think you've referred to this, but maybe you want to elaborate on it. Is it possible to use the Chat GPT for keywords? I think you mentioned you had tried that. So.
Yeah, no, Google Bard is different than Chat GPT. So Google Bard wasn't helpful because I think Google's trying to not help us cheat themselves. Chat GPT is very helpful in generating an initial keyword list. I always recommend you take that keyword list and go into Google Trends, put it into Google itself, and check to see how they're performing. And if the search results when you put it in Google matches what you want to show up for, meaning this is where you get that search intent from. You typed in, let's say it said, the next question in here is about SSL certificate near me, but then you go search it and it gives you something crazy and you're like, I don't want to be listing in that space. You may want to throw away that keyword and find a different set.
Okay, unfortunately, we are out of time, and that's all the time we have questions for. Just as a reminder to everyone, the webinar has been recorded and it will be available within the next day or so on our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org, under on-demand webinars. And our next live webinar is next Tuesday, November 7th at noon. And the topic is Canva Basics for Do-It-Yourself Communications with Bud Freund presenting. And again, you can find more details on our website. Again, if you'd like to take advantage of the free individual counseling, you can use the yellow bit.ly link that you see on the screen, or you can just go to our website and hit the Request a Mentor button. And if I could please ask you to fill out your evaluations at the end of the webinar, they're very helpful to us. So on behalf of SCORE, I'd like to thank all of you for attending our live webinar today. And in closing, a big special thank you for Nalini for such great information and her presentation today. Thanks again, Nalini, and have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.